This is the look of one of the most dangerous serial killers in U.S. history. He didn't leave signs of struggle or wounds, only silence and death. In the late 1980s, patients in hospitals across New Jersey and Pennsylvania began dying mysteriously. The killer wasn't an intruder. He was a nurse, trusted, calm, invisible. Charles Cullen moved from hospital to hospital, injecting lethal doses into IV bags. Some believe the number could be over 400. And in court, he laughed. This is the story of Charles Cullen, the angel of death.
A serial murderer, serial killer. You ruin the lives of your family, your children, and many people in this courtroom. You've bloodied and stained the medical profession.
Was born in February 1960 in New Jersey, the eighth child of a marriage that separated shortly after he was born. His father abandoned him, and soon after, his mother died in an accident. The death of his mother, besides obviously being traumatic, has a particular detail that we can think of as marking his complicated relationship with doctors. The woman had died in a car accident, and Charles had great difficulty getting the hospital to release the body. Perhaps that image of his mother stuck in a hospital bed always marked him, creating in him a strong aversion to anything similar. As we said, Cullen had a very difficult life, to say the least. His sister's boyfriends and his classmates constantly mistreated him, and at the age of 9, he made his first suicide attempt by drinking toxic chemicals from a chemistry set. He attempted suicide 20 times and had problems with drugs and alcohol. He also engaged in crimes that seemed to have the sole purpose of making others suffer. He put pets in trash cans, a very common behavior in serial killers when they are children. He poisoned drinks and was very violent with his wife, Adriana, who, from the moment they started dating, began to suspect his strange behavior and the mistreatment he subjected the family pet to. He also poisoned people by putting lighter fluid in their drinks. In fact, he attempted to kill Adriana's brother. His wife was not the only one who suspected his behavior. All the neighbors he had throughout his life confirmed the same thing. He was a strange man. In the middle of the night, he would run cats down the street and even talk to himself. Many of these killers, like Jeffrey Dahmer and the infamous BTK, benefit from the order and structure that military life offers, and Cullen was no exception. Before starting his work as a nurse, he enlisted in the Navy, although he was eventually expelled because his behavior became increasingly strange. The limit was when he was found sitting in the missile control room, dressed only in a surgical mask, latex gloves, and a medical apron. So how did someone who did this end up working in healthcare? Those who knew him claimed that during the time he was in the military, his strange behaviors diminished, but they returned with even more boldness when he started working as a nurse. These were his crimes. One of the problems when dealing with this type of killer is that it is difficult to know how many victims fell into their hands. Sometimes it's because they hide the evidence very well, and other times it's because they are so narcissistic that they even claim murders they didn't commit, simply out of egocentrism. In Cullen's case, he confessed to having committed 29 murders, but it is suspected that he killed more than 400 people. Cullen worked in hospitals for 16 years. His first victim was Judge John W. Yango Sr., a 72-year-old judge from Jersey City. Cullen, who worked in the burn unit of St. Barnabas Hospital in New Jersey, administered a lethal dose of intravenous medication on June 11, 1988. This story would repeat itself dozens of times in the nurse's life. In January 1992, Cullen left the hospital just when an investigation began to discover who was responsible for a series of contaminations in intravenous medication bags, which was at least suspicious. Within a month, he got a job at Warren Hospital, where he would kill 3 elderly women with an overdose of the cardiovascular drug digoxin. Although in general he took advantage of when patients were heavily sedated or unconscious, a 91-year-old oncology patient had the clarity to recognize him and alert the doctors. She told them that someone had injected something outside of schedule, but they all treated her like she was crazy. The next day, she died. Often it was Cullen himself who alerted the doctors when one of the patients he had poisoned was going into cardiac arrest, and he would just stand by as doctors tried unsuccessfully to save the patient's life. Not only did he kill them, but he would stay and enjoy their deaths for a long time, extremely eerie. He also harassed a co-worker, even entering her home while she was sleeping. He was also accused by his ex-wife, who reported this behavior. You might be wondering, how did no one ever realize what this man was doing? On the one hand, Cullen had his modus operandi working in his favor. He sought ways to be alone with the patients and injected them with medications they didn't need. Thus, it was difficult to find evidence of this crime, so it was generally believed that his victims had simply suffered from some other health issue. In this case, we can also see, aside from the cruelty of this individual, a certain irresponsibility on the part of the hospitals where Cullen worked. After spending several years working in different hospitals, he was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for depression in 1996. 2 years later, he was back working as a nurse in Pennsylvania. He was in charge of patients on ventilators and was accused of administering unnecessary medications to several patients. When he ended up breaking a patient's arm because he couldn't inject him, the clinic's management did nothing but fire him. Once again, Cullen was free to continue. He began working at Somerset Hospital in New Jersey, which would be his last station before prison. There, he killed at least 13 patients. In 2003, a U.S. government office specialized in poisonings warned Somerset Hospital that at least 4 of the mysterious deaths that had occurred there might have been caused by one of its employees, and they were right. The investigation lasted only 3 months, but even during that short time, while already under police scrutiny, Cullen managed to kill 5 more people. It was truly shocking. 2 detectives had a brilliant idea. They reached out to one of Cullen's closest co-workers, Amy. When they first questioned her, she was convinced her friend was an excellent nurse. But once they showed her the evidence, she didn't hesitate to cooperate. Amy began recording dozens of conversations with Cullen. She also took it upon herself to investigate the medical records of the patients who had died at the hospital. That's when she discovered something disturbing. Cullen was accessing patient files that didn't belong to him. He was entering and leaving rooms he wasn't assigned to, and the system showed he had been ordering medications that were never prescribed. But what Amy found next was even more horrifying. Cullen had been tampering with IV bags carefully prepared for each individual patient, so he could kill them without even entering their rooms. This was especially painful for Amy. She had grown close to many of the patients. She had grieved their deaths, and even shared her sadness with Cullen, not knowing he was the one responsible. It's believed he sometimes targeted patients under Amy's care, just to watch her suffer. He seemed to be aroused by the pain of others, something not uncommon in psychopaths. Amy eventually ran out of patience. She met with Cullen at a restaurant with a recorder hidden on her body. She told him she knew everything. She offered to go with him to the police to turn himself in, but he refused. Suddenly, Cullen's calm, friendly face changed, and his real self came to light. "I'm not turning myself in," he said. "I want to go down fighting." Amy delivered the final blow in this case. She was crucial in the interrogation. She convinced Cullen that if he didn't confess, she would be the one under investigation. That touched a nerve, and finally, he gave her the evidence needed to prove his guilt. When asked why he did it, his answer was chillingly simple: "I just couldn't stop." He was sentenced to 11 consecutive life terms and declared ineligible for parole for 397 years. Today he remains locked up, thankfully, in New Jersey State Prison. But the question still haunts us. Why did he do it? Cullen claimed he was trying to end the suffering of his patients, that doctors often treated them inhumanely, and it was too painful for him to watch. He said he couldn't bear to see them lying there in hospital beds, slowly fading away. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, this might stem from the trauma he experienced with his own mother's death. It scarred him deeply, so deeply that he eventually believed the only way to help others was by killing them. But here's the terrifying truth. Most of his victims weren't terminally ill. If not for him, they would still be alive.
Comprehend it. A registered nurse who was supposed to be a caretaker took the life of my brother for his own personal, selfish, and twisted gain. Charles Cullen, you are a coward. I am very brave for standing here today, but you yet cannot even look me in the eye and face me.
Take, for example, one of his victims. He had recently recovered from pneumonia, which isn't necessarily fatal, but suddenly he died of a heart attack. When investigators dug deeper, they found something alarming. Gall had extremely high levels of digoxin in his blood. This likely meant his final moments were terrifying and disorienting. An overdose of digoxin can cause symptoms like blurred vision and altered perception, and all of that without the patient having any idea what's happening to them. In many cases, victims would linger in this confused state for hours, sometimes even days, before finally dying. Cullen claimed he wanted to kill without causing pain, but in reality, what he did was incredibly painful for his victims. And while his behavior may seem far from that of a typical serial killer, there was one moment in his interrogation that revealed his true nature. When asked why he did what he did, his answer was chillingly simple: "They never stopped me." That phrase tells us everything. A common trait among serial killers is the thrill of danger, the adrenaline of playing with the law, pushing boundaries to see how far they can go without getting caught. And Cullen went really far. It's a shocking case, but one I felt needed to be shared here on the channel. The story of this killer is just fascinating. If you know of any other serial killers you'd like me to cover, drop their names in the comments. Let me know what topics you'd like to see in future videos. I really appreciate that back and forth with you all. And don't forget to subscribe. It would help me a lot to reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers and keep improving the quality of this content. Thanks so much for watching until the end.